Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about why avoidant partners sexually withdraw as a relationship becomes more serious. So this is a really common pattern. It's something that so many people experience, and it can be really disorienting, really confusing, and can fill us with a lot of shame and worry about, have I done something wrong? And I think that because sex tends to be this thing that we don't talk about very much, it's a really easy one to start spiraling and internalizing, particularly if you are more anxious and you already have a tendency to internalize someone's behavior as being about you. When we layer a sexual dynamic onto that and we feel so personally rejected and unworthy and feel like we've done something wrong or we are not good enough or not attractive enough, it's so easy to spiral into feeling like everything is hopeless and feeling so rejected and hurt by someone pulling away sexually. So in this video, I want to talk about what a sexual relationship generally looks like at the start for anxious avoidant couples and what happens as that shifts, why it shifts, what that can bring up for both people, and how you can respond to that as a more anxiously attached person in a way that doesn't make things worse, because as is often the case, our instinct as anxiously attached people is to push and poke and protest and do all of these things that actually can push someone further away and make things worse, when ultimately what we want to do is bring them closer again. And feeling like everything we're trying is actually having the opposite effect to what we're hoping for can feel really frustrating and exasperating, and that can lead us to feel even more panicked and powerless. So I'm going to be giving you some tips on how best to approach this in a way that isn't going to do that, so that you can hopefully get back onto the same page with your partner when it comes to sex. For those who don't know me, my name's Stephanie Rigg. I'm a relationship coach and I'm host of the On Attachment podcast, which is the world's leading podcast on how attachment shapes the way we live and love. And I have a lot of podcast episodes on anxious avoidant sexual dynamics. So as a side note, you can definitely check that out if you want to go deeper on this. So a lot of us will know from experience that at the start of a relationship in anxious avoidant dynamics, there can be a really strong sexual connection. There can be a lot of charge, a lot of desire, this sense of like fireworks and chemistry and connection. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I don't want you to feel like that's a red flag or something that you have to be really wary of, but it's just important to see it for what it is, which is the chemical high of novelty, someone new, the excitement of all of that connection, and recognizing that it doesn't yet have this overlay of vulnerability, the pressure of commitment. We don't really have any more of a tether than this initial excitement and hope and optimism and all of those things, right? So we're riding the waves of connection without any of the deeper stuff that we need to bring into that sexual sphere that could kind of dampen the mood. Now, for someone who's more anxious, the idea of having deeper commitment and vulnerability and love and a future together might only amplify their desire and their longing for connection with this person, and sex can feel like a sphere to deepen that connection. It's almost like the top rung of the ladder in terms of how I feel connected to you. So if we're having this really vibrant sexual relationship, I feel so desired by you, I feel so wanted by you, and that is like medicine to the soul of the anxiously attached person who can really struggle with things like unworthiness and fear of abandonment and fear of rejection. So if the sexual relationship is really strong, then that soothes all of those fears. And for anxiously attached people more broadly, sex tends to be the barometer for the relationship overall. For the avoidant person, having that really strong sexual connection at the start feels great, as it does for anyone, right? They feel successful, they feel wanted, they feel like this person really sees them in a positive light, and all of that feels really good. Now, what tends to happen as the relationship progresses and becomes a little bit more serious, a little bit more committed, is that the avoidant partner can start to associate sex with connection and vulnerability in a way that feels threatening, feels like pressure. And so if there is a broader relational environment where some of these things are creeping in and they're starting to feel like the anxious partner is expressing a lot of needs or things that are not quite right or things that they're disappointed by or you've let me down, all of that can start to heap onto the avoidant partner in this sense of like, ugh, you want all this stuff from me that I can't give you, and I feel like I'm always getting it wrong, I'm always messing up, no matter what I do, no matter what I try, you're always wanting more from me and telling me that what I'm doing isn't enough. And if that starts to creep into the sexual dynamic, which can happen even if you've never said a word about sex in terms of expressing needs or concerns or requests or whatever, the sexual dynamic just becomes like this microcosm for the whole relationship. It becomes like the stage on which all of this plays out. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because Our attachment patterns and dynamics are essentially the way that we respond to intimacy, the way we perceive intimacy as either, something we desperately want or something that kind of scares us. And sex is about as intimate as it gets. So for someone with avoidant patterns, when that emotional intimacy starts to come into the picture, along with expectations and dependency and reliability and all of this stuff that can feel overwhelming to someone with avoidant patterns, this sense of like, oh, I don't know that I can give you everything that you want and need. And that scares me that I'm going to fail and then you're going to be upset with me and all of those things. They start to associate sex with all of that because it is the peak expression of closeness. And so they can start to pull away and even lose desire and attraction, which of course for the anxious partner is terrifying and extremely triggering. This sense that like they wanted me before and they don't want me now. So what have I done? Is it something that I did sexually? Am I not attractive to them anymore? Are they seeing someone else? Are they losing interest in the relationship altogether? And what that will often do is trigger the anxious person into all of their activating strategies, all of their attempts at getting closer and kind of testing. And so the anxious partner might try and initiate sex more just to test the theory, to be like, are they really pulling away or is this just all in my head? So you might try more and more to be sexual with them. You might buy fancy lingerie or do all of these things to try and seduce them and see if they want you. And if they don't take the bait, if they kind of brush you off or push you away, then that confirms the theory of like, oh no, something is very wrong because they don't want me at all anymore. And of course, the more that you push and try, the more that experience of pressure is felt from the avoidant side and the less likely they are to move towards that pressure because their instinct is to move away from pressure. That is a picture that I'm sure a lot of people will know very well. Again, I have been there, I understand it, and it is really, really hard because it triggers us so deeply and there's so much shame associated with sex, and sexual rejection feels like the absolute peak of that shame response. And particularly, I think for women in heterosexual dynamics, because there's so much social conditioning around men are meant to want it all the time. So if I'm the one pursuing and my male partner is turning away from me, then I feel kind of pathetic and desperate and unattractive. And that is really, really hard. So what do we do about this? How can we approach this situation in a way that isn't going to make it worse? So recognizing that this isn't actually about sex. It's about vulnerability. It's about loss of self. All of these bigger symbolic things that the avoidant person can associate with deepening intimacy. So I think what can be really helpful is to try and lift the energy of the relationship rather than dragging it down into more heaviness. Because if the overall barometer of the relationship from the avoidant perspective is like, all we do is have serious conversations, all you do is tell me that you're upset with me about something, there's always something, that is not going to be a platform for them to then want to be intimate, because intimacy from that starting point is like the thing I'm dreading, because I associate intimacy with you being upset with me or heaping on more demands and more pressure. So actually trying to create an intimacy that feels connective and light and playful and fun and erotic, not necessarily in an overtly sexual sense, but erotic as in, there's vitality here, there's life here. So that might be putting more effort into going out into the world and doing things. That for avoidant people tends to be a really positive source of connection. For anxious people, it's like, we can just sit at home on the couch and stare into each other's eyes and I feel so connected to you. Whereas someone who's avoidant might feel really energized and positive about the relationship if you go for a weekend away somewhere, or you go to a festival, or you go out to a great new restaurant or a cocktail making class or whatever. Like doing fun, outward facing things together as a couple can sort of serve as a reminder to them that like you are still individual people, there's still a world out there. The relationship doesn't have to be this claustrophobic space where all we do is talk about our feelings and our needs and everything that's wrong. We can be in a relationship and it doesn't have to mean a loss of independence. It doesn't have to mean claustrophobia and engulfment and all of those things. So really putting in effort together to breathe oxygen into the relationship if it's feeling a bit stuck and stale, it tends to be really effective as a way to reinvigorate that. And also seeing our partner out in the world interacting with other people is often a really great way to reinvigorate desire, because we start to see them through the eyes of other people. So if you are, out at a nice restaurant with your partner, then they might be more attracted to you because they're seeing you through the eyes of everyone else there, rather than if it's just two of you at home all the time, they're seeing seeing you from a different lens, and both have a place in a relationship for sure. But if the sexual dynamic is feeling strained or kind of flat, breathing a bit more life into it by going out into the world and experiencing things together, experiencing novelty together, can be a really nice way to kind of hit the reset button on the sexual relationship. And I find that that tends to work better than tackling it head on as its own big issue. And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely scope to directly have conversations about sex. And I think we need to be able to do that, of course. But if you've tried that, or if it feels like that's just making things worse, sometimes kind of solving the problem by leaving the problem, recognizing that it might be a function of what else is going on in the relationship and an overall feeling of staleness or stuckness or excessive heaviness, sometimes bringing some lightness and oxygen and vitality back into the relationship and into yourself individually can be really, really supportive in shifting some of those sexual dynamics that otherwise feel a bit stuck. Okay, if this has been helpful, definitely check out my free training on how to heal anxious attachment and finally feel secure in life and love. I share my exact framework that I've taught to thousands of people to heal their anxious attachment, as well as some reasons why you might be stuck if you've been on this healing journey for a while, and how to know if it's you or your partner that's the problem. So is this just an anxious thing, or is there something really wrong in my relationship? I address all of that and more in this free training. The link to register for that is in the description. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me, guys, and I'll see you again soon.